Happy Halloween. Leave now while you still can.
Leave now before Master finds you.
Who is that knocking at my door? Who is that knocking at my door? Who is that knocking at my door? Be gone with you.
Hello everyone, today's video I'll be talking about Dracula Has Risen from the Grave from 1968. Unlike Hammer's Frankenstein series, the sequels were reboots. The Hammer Dracula movies were the only ones with follow-up continuity with little consistency, despite having different characters and no Van Helsing. It was directed by Freddie Francis and not Terence Fisher, because he was recovering from an automobile accident around this time when this movie went into production. Freddie Francis, who I mentioned in my Evil Frankenstein review, directed some good Hammer movies, and was a well-known cinematographer for some good movies like Glory and the Cape Fear remake by Martin Scorsese, and he also did some David Lynch movies like The Elephant Man, Dune, and The Straight Story. Crazy I did not care for Evil Frankenstein, yet I like this movie better for whatever reason. The movie opens up with a priest finding a dead girl hanging upside down in a church bell, and we assume that she was bitten by Dracula. But who was this girl? And when did Dracula bite her in the last movie? This part was a little bit off balance and didn't make any sense at all. The main character, Paul, is a nice man, a gentleman. He may have been an atheist, but he did respect people's wishes of what they believed in. You can make the argument that Paul was more of an agnostic than an atheist because he did say that he did question his faith sometimes a little bit. But back in this time period, back in the 1900s, if you were someone who told another person that you were an atheist for not believing in God, you were looked down upon by your peers and disrespected. Making the lead main character an atheist makes it interesting and harder for Paul to fight Dracula because of being a skeptic on the living dead and the supernatural. When Paul and his girlfriend's home celebrating her birthday, he meets her uncle who is a priest. He freaks out on Paul for not believing in God. The way Maria's uncle flips out on Paul when he said he's not believing in God, it was kind of funny, but at the same time, it's like, dude, chill out. I also like how Paul is not an expert on vampires or does not know anything about Dracula. He's just a regular guy. After Paul stabs Dracula, the priest tells him to pray. Paul says no praying. He asks the priest to say the prayer, and with no prayer, Dracula's not dead yet. In the past, vampire Dracula movies, normally stabbing Dracula with a stake was the way to end Dracula, but in this movie they changed it up a little bit. Paul really loved his girlfriend, Maria Mueller, played by the very beautiful talent of Veronica Carlson, who was in a lot of good Hammer movies. She does a good job in this movie. She still seemed to love Paul despite that he was an atheist. Despite Maria's uncle being a dick to Paul, he was not a bad character all in all. He was a good uncle and father figure to his niece Maria. After losing his temper over Paul's belief, he learns to respect Maria's wishes and that she really loves Paul. He asks Paul to destroy Dracula after he dies. Paul promises he will kill Dracula despite having no knowledge on vampires. In Dracula Prince of Darkness, Dracula had no lines in that movie. In this movie, Dracula finally has lines to say, but he doesn't say a whole lot of lines in this movie. I guess Christopher Lee did not have a lot of problems with the dialogue this time. You can tell Christopher Lee was not thrilled and hated playing Dracula again. He was being forced by Hammer Studios to play Dracula, otherwise the writers would have been out of a job. Christopher Lee also felt at this point in time in the Dracula series, they were writing the story first, then Dracula was coming second, and in the later Hammer Dracula sequels, they had nothing to do with the Bram Stoker's novel. I like this movie. His dialogue is not the best, but still, despite getting annoyed and tired of playing Dracula, Christopher Lee is still fun to watch. I love the line when he says, "How my revenge is complete." Great Christopher Lee Dracula line ever, and probably one of the best Dracula lines in a movie ever, period. Seeing the waitress was kind of a whore. She loved Paul, but I don't think she wanted him for sex. Paul doesn't go far with her when he's drunk and he tries to take advantage of him. Not that Paul did not like and appreciate Xena. Paul did not see her like that. Not even Dracula doesn't like her either at all, even when she's possessed by him. It's either you felt bad for Xena or disliked her because of only using men for sex because she did not love herself. Ewan Hopper plays a priest who is like the Renfield in this movie. He's possessed by Dracula. He doesn't want to do what Dracula tells him to do, knowing that it's a sin and wrong, but he has no choice because he's under Dracula's possession and spell. Dracula taking control of him makes him lose his faith in God. Despite his mistakes and being controlled by Dracula, he does have redemption at the end of this movie, helping Paul defeat Dracula. When Dracula finally dies at the end of this movie, he falls down and gets stabbed on a cross. Once again, good over evil, but they killed off Dracula differently. The priest says a prayer. They did not repeat the same death sequences like in horror and Prince of Darkness. Also, it's hinted that Paul may have finally believed in God, and he finally has faith. Here's a crazy fact about this movie that's going to surprise you. Believe it or not, it's rated G, and when I ask myself, why is that? That makes no sense. This movie has stabbing and blood coming out of Dracula's eyes. This movie should have been rated PG-13, which would have made a lot more sense. But back then, rating systems were not around, despite 1968 was the year when rating systems came around to existence. I guess this movie was made before the rating systems where the MPAA came out. I guess they did not watch this movie, just gave it a random rating system like, whatever. All in all, I like this one. It's a good solid sequel. I like the story, the characters are likable, interesting. I'm not disappointed. I'm amazed and impressed. The movie's consistent for me. It's fresh, new, and not cliche. They get out of their comfort zone to try something different. Even though I still miss Peter Cushing as Van Helsing, I still find myself having fun with this movie. That wraps up today's video. Tomorrow we'll dive into Taste the Blood of Dracula. See you soon.